Good day. My name is Omotayo Hamzat. I work for WHO in the Nigerian country office. I'm a pharmacist by training, and I also have a postgraduate degree in public health. I'll be presenting today on the global response to antimicrobial resistance. The outline for the presentation will be as follows. We'll try to know what antimicrobial resistance is, what is the impact of antimicrobial resistance, the global response to mitigate antimicrobial resistance, what are the key challenges, and what WHO has been doing to address these key challenges and opportunities. Antimicrobial resistance, simply put in a very basic language, is when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites change over time and they become no longer responsive to medicines, making infections harder to treat and increasing the risk of disease spread, severe illness, and death. Simply put, again, is that the antimicrobial medicines become ineffective, which means apart from the spread of the diseases, severe illness, and death, there's the loss, economic loss also attached to this. And infections become very difficult to or impossible to treat. The alarming rate at which they spread all over the country is actually very, very huge. The spread of the superbugs, that's this antimicrobial resistance. And we can appreciate this further when we look at this current slide. Drug resistance infections are affecting the lives of thousands of people worldwide. For example, about one child dies every 3 minutes from multi-drug resistance organism, particularly when it refers to sepsis. And 1.3 million deaths is recorded that are attributable to antimicrobial resistance every year. It is estimated by 2050, 28 million people will be living in poverty. And that becomes very significant because when you consider that an additional healthcare cost of $1 trillion will be needed by 2050. And not only about human beings, there will be livestock decline by 7.5% by 2050. For the increase in illness, severe illnesses, and death, 6 pathogens are actually found to be responsible for the vast majority of the death associated or attributed to bacterial antimicrobial resistance. And these 6 pathogens are the E. coli, followed by Staphylococcus aureus, Klebsiella pneumonia, Streptococcus pneumonia, Acinetobacter, and Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. These 6 organisms have been identified as leading cause of death and that are attributed to bacterial antimicrobial resistance. It also affects the SDG indicator 3D2, which is talking about proportion of bloodstream infections. And E. coli resistance to 3rd generation cephalosporin and MRSA and Acinetobacter has been identified. And you see the statistics that about between 25% and 66% of the global median, and the interquartile range of 17 to 58% reported by 60 countries for E. coli, and interquartile range of 11 to 40% reported by 50 countries in 2029 for MRSA. The SDG indicator 3D2, that is proportion of bloodstream infection, also tells us, describe the impact of antimicrobial resistance. E. coli resistance to 3rd generation cephalosporins and MRSA and Acinetobacter. E. coli has, from the study, the report, a global median of about 37%, an interquartile range of 17 to 58% reported by 60 countries in 2019, and interquartile range for MRSA is about 11 to 40%, reported by 54 countries in 2019 also. And the interquartile range for Acinetobacter of 52 to 87%, reported by 57 countries in 2019. The other time I spoke about the presence, the spread, the alarming rate at which antimicrobial resistance is spreading globally. And this does not exclude the high-income countries. For example, it has been identified as a threat in the United States, and that each year antibiotic resistance bacteria and fungi cause at least an estimated 2,868,700 infections annually, and about 35,900 deaths. And we also saw increase in infection caused by erythromycin-resistant organisms to about 315%, 124% drug-resistant Neisseria gonorrhea, and that of E. coli to be producing Enterobacteriaceae to be about 50%. And here comes COVID-19, which affects the implementation of the mitigation plan and activities for antimicrobial resistance. In a survey, countries were asked if COVID-19 had impacted their AMR NAP development and implementation, and 151 countries did say yes to this. And same applies to whether there were operational impact in awareness campaign, and about 128 countries also said yes to this. The preceding slides identified that there is a need for a coordinated action against antimicrobial resistance. And this is because it cuts across different sectors of the society. The high-income countries and the low-income countries are not left out, and because it is a complex problem that requires a united multi-sectoral approach. Multi-sectoral approach because it cuts across human health, animal health, and even the environment and the foods that we take. The One Health approach brings together multiple sectors and stakeholders to work in the design and implementation of programs, in the design and implementation of policies, legislations, and research to attain better public health. And that is the basis of the actions being taken by the United Nations. We'll discuss this further. Like I said, countries have not been sitting on their horse and watching antimicrobial resistance to spread globally. As far back as 2001, WHO launched a global strategy for the containment of AMR framework. This is a framework for the achievement interventions to slow down the emergence of antimicrobial resistance. In 2015, the Global Action Plan was endorsed at the World Health Assembly, and subsequently the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Organization for Animal Health endorsed this Global Action Plan. In 2015 also, the Global Antimicrobial Resistance and Use Surveillance System was launched, as well as the World Antimicrobial Antibiotics Awareness Week was launched in 2015. Some countries have been either reporting into the global, the GLASS, that's the Global Antimicrobial Resistance and Use Surveillance System, and we have been commemorating the World Antibiotics Awareness. While in 2016, the UN General Assembly high-level meeting on AMR actually brought up the setting up of the Interagency Coordination Group, which submitted their reports later in 2019. In 2017, WHO developed the priority pathogens list and also the tripartite joint secretariat of the Food and Agricultural Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, and the World Health Organization was formed. And this is in agreement for them to implement a single framework to address antimicrobial resistance across food, animal, and human sector. In 2020, Antibiotic Awareness Week was changed to World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. This is in recognition of the fact that it is beyond the issue of antibiotics, and this includes all antimicrobial agents, as the spread of antimicrobial resistance is cutting across all kinds of organisms. And the slogan for the team was changed to antimicrobials, handle with care, signifying that not just antibiotics that we need to handle with care in terms of this use, but also all antimicrobial agents, because all antimicrobial agents are prone to actually antimicrobial resistance. Finally, in 2022, the Quadripartite Alliance was formed, which included now the UN Environmental Program. And this is very significant because the environment also contributes, and it is within the environmental sector that provides the interlinkage for the spread of antimicrobial resistance from animal to human or vice versa. In all this, WHO Antimicrobial Resistance Division is leading, guiding, and facilitating the organization's global response to AMR based on the Global Action Plan on AMR and the 13th General Program of Work, and also considering the SDGs. And the strategic objectives are 4, which are 1, stepping up leadership for the AMR response. 2, driving public health impact in every country, leaving no one behind. Research and development is the 3rd, for better access to quality AMR prevention care. And then monitoring the AMR burden itself, and also monitoring the global response. So I'll go back to the Quadripartite Alliance between FAO, OIE, UNEP, and WHO. This is set up to coordinate the global One Health response, guided by a strategic framework. The goal is to preserve antimicrobial efficacy and ensure sustainable and equitable access to antimicrobials for responsible and prudent use in human, in animal, plant, contributing to achieving the SDG as stated before. If you recall the bloodstream infection indicator that we talked about. So this brought together global leaders, group on AMR with co-chairs and also with chairs, co-chair and ex-officio members of the global leaders group, and including one of our own, Professor C.O. Ojebushi, a former minister of health. So one of the ways WHO is contributing is by analyzing the pipelines of antibacterials, antifungal agents, and vaccines against bacterial priority pathogens. You recall I said that WHO did actually develop a priority list of pathogens, and one of the first reports was released in 2022, Q2, on antibacterials. That of for antifungals will be coming up between in Q3, and while the publication for vaccines will come up in Q3 2022. This is important because it actually assess the pipelines of available antibacterials, antifungal vaccines against bacterial pathogens, and how they are developing antimicrobial resistance, and also what are the activity against these pathogens. So on the National Action Plan, the first edition, different countries have developed, so many countries have, some are currently developing, while some other countries, they're actually approaching the lifespan of, the 5-year lifespan of this National Action Plan. And please note that national action plans were actually developed by countries following the Global Action Plan that was launched in 2015. And the Global Action Plan served like a kind of response, a kind of guide for countries to know what are their priorities and what they need to know in the context of their own country. So the result of an assessment shows that 140 countries, 86%, have actually developed the National Action Plan. while 32 are actually actively implementing and monitoring the National Action Plan. This is significant because the first version, that's the National Action Plan 1.0, NAP 1.0, actually gave us a clue to so many lessons that we can bring on to the next generation of National Action Plan. While one of the things what I was observed was that most countries have very ambitious national action plans, but implementation and the execution of these plans have been very slow. And 5 years, clear increase. It was also noticed that there was clear increase in countries who have developed, implemented, and monitored their national action plan over the past 5 years, based on all 194 member states of the World Health Organization. What are the key challenges that we have seen that serves as one of the lessons we have learned from National Action Plan 1.0? Fragmentation instead of an integrated programmatic approach. In most countries, AMR was taken as if it is a vertical program, whereas it is a cross-cutting issue that will require the integration into already existing programs and activities in countries. AMR responds with recognition of 6 interdependent building blocks, which include political commitments and governance. In most countries, we have that commitment. There's governance structure, but funding was really challenged because AMR is an emerging thing, and they are trying to find their setting in the implementation of things. Access to early diagnosis is also a challenge in a quality assured lab network. Most lab networks are still struggling with the identification, monitoring of the emergence of antimicrobial resistance, and also even the diagnosis of diseases, which makes treatment to be largely empirical instead of using quality assured lab network to identify and diagnose these diseases, and also guiding the prescription of medicines towards this. So limiting access to appropriate treatment because there was lack of adequate diagnosis. Prevention of infection. Infection prevention control is also still a challenge in many countries, and particularly uninterrupted supply chains, which became very heightened during the COVID-19 lockdown across the country. Supply chains were interrupted and countries suffered access to quality assured medicines and other health commodities. Surveillance and evidence generation is also still at its very beginning stage. Integration of these 6 building blocks and their movement together, considering that all these 6 building blocks are very important, will help. So funding, awareness creation, education, regulation, particularly for supply chain and access to medicines, and human resources were key challenges. So the multisectoral response to the biggest challenge they are facing are including coordination, funding, manpower, like I identified previously, sustainability of the program, which can be achieved through integration with existing programs such as WASH, infection prevention and control, rational use of medicine, instead of creating a vertical program. So WHO responds to identified challenges and opportunities. Examples of progress on WHO initiatives, which include 1, strengthening the AMR governance and National Action Plan implementation and monitoring. WHO NAP implementation handbook was developed and countries are using it. Recently, the NAP costing and budgeting tool was also developed, and countries are being trained in the use of this tool. Multi-sectoral leadership courses are available on WHO Island courses. A people-centered AMR response framework was also developed to guide how the implementation of antimicrobial resistance mitigation activities should go in an integrated manner. The WHO Global Initiative to expand and innovate bacteria diagnosis and AMR. Innovation of AMR surveillance, nationally representative AMR supply, and the TISA data platform for integrated multi-sectorial surveillance. The AMR research agenda for the human sector is also on board, where there are technical assistance mechanisms to support countries to implement, either develop or implement their national action plan and how to monitor this. These slides just show the WHO NAP implementation handbook, which was released in March 2022 and describes a practical 6-step process to country-level strengthening of governance and coordination, prioritizing activities, because what was observed in the NAP 1.0 was that we have so many activities, and the sequential implementation of these activities are actually not very appropriate, leading to slow, haphazard implementation of the National Action Plan. For countries to be able to cost the operational plan, mobilize resources, implement prioritized activities, and then monitor and evaluate their implementation plan. And next is that there is a coalition of new and existing WHO tools and guidance to support each step. Many tools during the pilot also used by other sectors are also available. Each country demand for related trainings since the launch in March 2022 has been observed, and WHO is doing its best to support countries in developing their capacity to be able to carry out these 6 steps that we have listed above. So I will discuss briefly the people-centered framework to inform a programmatic AMR response. And why not spending too much time on the 4 boxes outside, which are very traditional and very germane in the implementation of the NAP. Perhaps the most and the newest part of these mitigation activities in a people-centered framework will be that the healthcare facility, including primary healthcare, and now the new component is the consideration for the community through an accountable leadership and coordination process. And in fact, it is observed that the community is very important in the implementation of programmatic AMR response, which we found lacking in most of the NAP 1.0 from countries. The involvement and the engagement of community have been identified to be one of the key changing activity that will support the mitigation of antimicrobial resistance. So I want to submit that the progress, even as we go into the National Action Plans 2.0, will actually depend on commitment of government, the collaboration between sectors and within sectors, and sustainable investment will support progress in mitigating the emergence of antimicrobial resistance. Thank you for listening to me.